Hello, everyone, and welcome to this evening's conversation. Here at the No Boy, a multimedia presentation. My name is Katie Christensen. I'm a curator of education and statewide engagement at the University of Wyoming Art Museum. And we're so delighted that you're here with us this evening. We know there's a lot happening, and so it's great to see some folks joining us, and hopefully there will be a few more as we get started tonight. So this conversation is, it's part of Conversations Beyond the Walls, a virtual symposium. And tonight our featured guest is Julian Saporiti, and we're going to feature his research and creative works. But before I introduce Julian, I want to tell a little bit about the program here this evening. The project that this is surrounded by originated from American Studies program and the University of Wyoming Art Museum as a series of talks, presentations, and art activations held in conjunction with the exhibition Moving Walls, Mountain Barracks in the Big Horn Basin, which came from the Heart Mountain Wyoming Foundation, and it's now on view at the University of Wyoming Art Museum. So if you're in Laramie, we'd love for you to come and see it. Rachel, my colleague here at the Art Museum, is posting some things in the chat. So if you're not in Laramie, you can take a look at the digital version of the exhibition that she's posted on the chat there. So the symposium goals are to honor the history of Japanese American peoples incarcerated by the US government in Wyoming and beyond in World War II, and to integrate the arts with complex cultural issues. So in doing so, we hope to use an historical event to address contemporary narratives such as global human migrations, displacement of peoples, power and control, empathy and belonging, homesteading, resiliency, diversity, and social justice issues of today. So we collectively acknowledge that the University of Wyoming occupies the ancestral and traditional lands of Cheyenne, Arapaho, Crow, and Shoshone indigenous peoples, along with other native tribes who call the Great Basin and Rocky Mountain region home. We recognize, support, and advocate alongside Indigenous individuals and communities who live here now and with those forcibly removed from their homelands. So tonight, and as part of the whole symposium, we encourage respectful language be used in any discussions, self-reflection and presence during tonight, and hope that these dialogues continue long after this evening concludes. All of our events will be recorded and posted to the Art Museum's YouTube channel soon after conclusion. So if you've missed any of the presentations, you can take a look now, and tonight's will be posted soon after we're done. If you'd like to take a look at anything else, or we have one more session coming up next Thursday, you can register for that. Rachel's gonna post a link for the registration in the chat as well. So before we hand it over to Julian, I just want to thank some of the sponsors for our project. It includes the UW American Studies program, UW College of Law, the Heart Mountain Wyoming Foundation, UW's History Department, the Homesteading Museum in Powell, UW Libraries, UW School of Culture, Gender, and Social Justice, the Wyoming Institute for Humanities Research, and a special shout out tonight to the UW Honors College for sponsoring Julian's presentation tonight. So the evening's webinar format has both chat and Q&A functions, and if you're not familiar with any of those, down on the lower portion of your screen, there are little buttons. Feel free to chat throughout the evening tonight amongst yourselves. And later we'll have some Q&A time with Julian. If you'd like to ask a specific question, please use the Q&A box and I can help kind of moderate and announce those questions. Also note that you can switch between views. The gallery view allows just one person to be viewed at a time, or speaker view will only show the person currently speaking. You can toggle back and forth at your own preference there. If you need transcription services this evening, follow the link that's posted in the chat. And a big shout out and thanks to Noelle Schatz for her assistance there this evening. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our special guest this evening, Julian Saporiti. Julian earned his MA in American Studies from Wyoming and is finishing his PhD in American Studies at Brown University. His multimedia project, No No Boy, has received national critical acclaim for its blend of scholarship and art. And tonight we have a series of presentations with Julian, but I'm gonna let him talk a little bit more about it before we dive right in. The last thing I'll say is I have had the pleasure of kind of screening some of these films already, so hopefully you'll do some moving in your seats, and you know, we can't see you, so if you want to get up and dance, you can do that too. So Julian, please take it away.
Just briefly, I'll say it's really great to be back in Wyoming, at least virtually. It's where I spent a lot of my formative years and the beginning of the project, which you'll see examples of to come. So what you'll see is a few songs that I'll play, which combine archival imagery and music based on my research. Then you'll see a couple short films, one a documentary, one musical, and then you'll kind of get a look into the way I actually use audio samples from the Mountain Barracks to make music to sing over. So hopefully it'll be entertaining and a little different from the normal Zoom stuff that we've all been doing forever. And without further ado, enjoy the show. And then if you have any questions, I'm here.
So here we go. Sorry, folks, I just heard that we had no sound. I'm gonna try it again. Bear with me.
Don't it feel like a movie, teaching this girl how to waltz? Left feet she might have 3, but she sure feels nice in my arms. Old folks singing old songs, playing the agreed upon key. My eyes are stuck on her, her eyes don't leave her feet. All this girl, no classmate, maybe this is more than a lark. Brown boots, a dirt floor, we're dancing like 2 candles in the dark. Pretty, I call nails on her back door. She got a brother down in Topaz. I saw that name once in a jewelry store. Wind around past the skaters and pump, looking for a cut in the wine. She got a key to the cellar door. I don't ask questions, man, just stand there and spy. Oh, this girl, she gets wild. I miss the garden at the Golden Gate Park. Young blood and old songs, we're dancing like two candles in the dark. Tell you, man, it's like some movie, and she just tailor-made for the part. Lamps licking the roof beam, she's got good looking down to an art. Hear the old folks sing them old songs, the background just fades away. Coffee can fire's almost gone. She says, I gotta get out of this place. Oh, this girl, a pinpoint, the moment you feel the spark. Brown boots, a dirty floor, we're dancing like two candles in the dark. Dancing like two candles in the dark. We're dancing like two candles in the dark.
Hello, that last song was called Two Candles in the Dark. It's about a young woman at Heart Mountain taking around a young guy and just trying to escape, the reality of the situation. Behind barbed wire, really desolate conditions, having been moved out of LA. These kids are maybe 19, 20 years old, and they sort of go on this journey throughout the camp, which is kind of a composite of my research, reading camp newspapers, the ice skating, people playing ukulele by campfires, old men singing in the showers, and just putting this all together in a narrative of these two kids wandering off down to the root cellar, which the incarcerated themselves dug out. There's two of them, big as a football field. I just kind of imagine these two kids going down, lighting a coffee can fire in the middle of the root cellar and finding some moments alone. And that's what I really love to do. And I think that's what songs can do, maybe more so than books or academic writing, is you can get in those quotidian, on the ground, just really slice of life moments to think about affect and emotion, to think about not only big ideas of state and incarceration, immigration and stuff like that, but boredom and falling in love and these kind of small moments that I think really benefit us when we think about history to consider. But this next song I want to do is called A Century Out of Reach. I've actually never performed it before, so good for you. It's a song about folks who sort of were under two layers of marginalization. So people who, were sent to these camps, a lot of times you hear stories of being in the Boy Scouts or playing sports or getting married. This kind of all-American, despite being behind barbed wire citizen that many Japanese Americans were. But I think about a work called Looking for Jiro by a performance artist and scholar named Tina Takamoto, and she explores very little documented queer lives in these camps. This work really struck me, and I thought about, man, you're sent to a concentration camp, and on top of that, you have another layer of being isolated from the rest of your peer group. And because it was the 40s, because Japanese American community, like most American communities, were not open to homosexuality, these people kind of hid away. And most of them died, obviously, without children. And so this song reflects the very little evidence that we do have of queer lives in these camps, but it also does some imagining
Thinking about those generations of immigrant bachelors who never found that heteronormative all-American lifestyle. And once again, these kind of different layers of marginalization that people might have experienced. This is called A Century Out of Reach.
A hesitating wonder here beneath the floor. Postcard of a matador. Contraband and whispers, pre-war San Francisco. Saving a week's wages for the portrait studio. Hold you still, my lovers, a copy for a siege. Just a century out of reach. You learn from Yonemura on a trip to Yellowstone. Watching waterfall alone. Mr. Okumoto, 29.5B. Lifelong bachelor, waiting patiently. Sun-kissed bodybuilders, dark room obscenities. Just a century out of reach. I realize your life was an unfired loaded gun. The vampire's waiting wife passed away before the setting sun. Three gentlemen by the tower had some set of clothes. Smile, a cigarette in repose. Muscle men in cufflinks, letters and photos. Tina.
We're gonna try it a different way. Sorry, folks.
Don't it feel like
a movie teaching this girl how to waltz? Left feet she might have 3, but she sure feels nice in my arms. Old folks singing old songs, playing the agreed upon key. My eyes are stuck on her, her eyes don't leave her feet. All this girl, no class ring. Maybe this is more than a lark. Brown boots, a dirt floor. We're dancing like 2 candles in the dark. Pretty outlaw call a quarter past, like knuckles on a barrack door. She got got a brother down in Topaz. I saw that name once in a jewelry store. Wind around past the skaters and pond, looking for a cut in the wire. She got a key to the cellar door. I don't ask questions, man, just stand there inspired. Oh, this girl, she gets why I miss the garden at the Golden Gate Park. Young blood and old songs, we're dancing like two candles in the dark. Tell you, man, it's like some movie, and she's just tailor-made for the part. Lamps licking the roof beams, she's got good looking down to an art. Hear the old folks sing them old songs, the background just fades away. Our coffee can fire's almost gone. She says, I gotta get out of this place. Oh, this girl, a pinpoint, the moment you feel a spark. Brown boots, a dirt floor, we're dancing like two candles in the dark. Dancing like two candles in the dark. We're dancing like two candles in the dark.
Hello, that last song was called Two Candles in the Dark. It's about a young woman at Heart Mountain taking around a young guy and just trying to escape, you know, the reality of the situation behind barbed wire, really desolate conditions, having been moved out of LA. These kids are maybe 19, 20 years old, and they sort of go on this journey throughout the camp, which is kind of a composite of my research, reading camp newspapers, the ice skating, people playing ukulele by campfires, old men singing in the showers, and just putting this all together in a narrative of these two kids wandering off down to the root cellar, which the incarcerees themselves dug out. There's two of them, big as a football field. I just kind of imagine these two kids going down, lighting a coffee can fire in the middle of the root cellar and finding some moments alone. And that's what I really love to do, and I think that's what songs can do, maybe more so than books or academic writing, is you can get in those quotidian, on the ground, just really slice of life moments to think about affect and emotion, to think about not only big ideas of state and incarceration, immigration and stuff like that, but boredom and falling in love and these kind of small moments that I think really benefit us when we think about history to consider. But this next song I want to do is called A Century Out of Reach. I've actually never performed it before, so good for you. It's a song about folks who sort of were under two layers of marginalization. So people who, you know, were sent to these camps, a lot of times you hear stories of being in the Boy Scouts or playing sports or getting married. This kind of all-American, despite being behind barbed wire citizen that many Japanese Americans were. But I think about a work called Looking for Jiro by a performance artist and scholar named Tina Takamoto, and she explores the very little documented queer lives in these camps. This work really struck me, and I thought about, man, you're sent to a concentration camp, and on top of that, you know, you have another layer of being isolated from the rest of your peer group. And because it was the 40s, because the Japanese American community, like most American communities, were not open to homosexuality, these people kind of hid away, and most of them died, obviously, without children. And so this song reflects the very little evidence that we do have of queer lives in these camps, but it also does some imagining, you know, thinking about those generations of immigrant bachelors who never found that heteronormative, all-American lifestyle. And once again, these kind of different layers of marginalization that people might have experienced. This is called A Century Out of Reach. A hesitating wonder hid beneath the floor, postcard of a matador, contraband and whispers, pre-war San Francisco, saving a week's wages for the portrait studio. Hold you still, my lovers, a copy for us each, just a century out of reach. He learned from Yonemura on a trip to Yellowstone, watching waterfall alone. Mr. Okumoto, 295B, lifelong bachelor, waiting patiently. Sun-kissed bodybuilders, dark room obscenities, just a century out of reach. I realize your life was an unfired loaded gun. The vampire's waiting wife who passed away before the setting sun. Three gentlemen by the tower, handsome set of clothes, smile a cigarette in repose. Muscle men in cufflinks, letters and photos. Tina Takamoto, still looking for Jiro. I drift to Giovanni, Baldwin on the beach, and that sad old queen in Paris, just a century out of reach. Kiyoshi Kuromiya, write down his name, please. If you ever need a hero, just a century out of reach. Just a century out of reach. Hi again. That's stupid. The next thing I want to show you is a short film that I directed called For Joy. Now, one of the most impactful things for me as a scholar and just as a person while I was living in Wyoming for a number of years and teaching and being a grad student was stumbling across a picture of a jazz band at the Heart Mountain Interpretive Center. I was so enthralled by this because I had never seen Asian American jazz musicians before, let alone in the middle of a concentration camp, let alone in Wyoming. So this was really inspirational, and then I found out one of the singers for this band was still alive. Her name's Joy Teraoka. She lives in Hawaii. And this was a film that captures myself and a classmate going out to Hawaii and doing a concert with her. And I can't say enough about Joy. She's the reason why I do things like this, why I do concerts, is to tell her story and so many other stories. What you'll see directly after the film For Joy, which is about 14 minutes long, is a short musical film, which is a collaboration with Portland Taiko. It's a Japanese drumming ensemble out here where I am during quarantine. And I took one of their pieces, and it gives you a really interesting look through their music combined with my editing of archival visuals of the Japanese American experience from immigration to incarceration. In the middle of that is a song I wrote called Mini Doka, which is about the camp in Idaho. And I hope you enjoy that piece as well. So let's roll the movies, and I'll see you in like 20 minutes.
You Gonna take a sentimental journey. Gonna put my heart at ease. Gonna take a sentimental journey to renew old memories.
When she was 15 years old, Joy Takeshita was forcibly removed from her home in Los Angeles and sent to Heart Mountain. Behind the barbed wire, under constant guard, and living in impoverished conditions, she always kept her positivity. And she joined a band.
7, that's the time we leave at 7. And I'll be waiting up for heaven.
During that first harsh winter, Joy auditioned for the Georgie Gawa Orchestra, a formidable big band comprised of semi-professional musicians and some talented high schoolers. The band practiced daily and performed at camp dances every weekend. In fact, during the war years, they were the only swing band in Wyoming and performed across the state.
Sentimental journey home. Sentimental journey home.
You don't need me, but
Oh, yeah, I do.
I'm there.
I do.
I'm supporting you.
You better be there.
That's beautiful.
What did it mean for 16-year-old Joy to sing a song like that with this big band?
Oh, it's a thrill and an honor, because if we were back home in Los Angeles, I know the opportunity would never have come to me. George and Chikan, Susumui.
So these are the two Shotokians.
Yeah, Ayami.
And is that
That's Tet.
Yeah.
And this is Eiko, the pianist.
Eiko, the pianist, yeah.
Watanabe.
So what did it mean for someone like Georgie Gawa to bring that music to camp? What did it mean for the teenagers in camp?
Oh, it was wonderful. And he was a professional before the war, a professional musician. And he also played with the Shotokian in Japan. He was skillful enough, knowledgeable enough to write the charts for the bands. I didn't know anything. I just had a lot of guts. No brains, all guts. It's just the nearness of you.
I often say, Joy is like my Japanese grandma. For 6 years, we have maintained a meaningful long-distance correspondence. At first, we talked about her time in camp, but after a while, we just became friends and bonded as musicians. A chance to meet her meant more to me than I could say. But sharing this trip with my colleague, Aaron Aoyama, added an extra layer of meaning. Aaron is not only a gifted singer, but a talented, forward-thinking scholar. And in 2018, she was an irreplaceable tour mate and collaborator. Her grandmother, Misa Hitakiyama, had also been incarcerated as a young woman at Heart Mountain, but unfortunately, she died before Aaron could ever ask her about it. For the two of us, meeting Joy was an important connection to the past.
I love that bow and the hair. It's
Oh
beautiful.
my God, my hair was...
You knew how to pose. You kept such good record of your friends.
Memories, like the corners of my mind, misty watercolored memories of the way we were. Scattered pictures of the smiles we left behind, smiles we gave to one another for the way we were.
I love watching you sing this because that line, so it's the laughter we remember. That's what I felt like we were going through yesterday, knowing, it was a hard time, but all of the optimism and, the joy that you still found.
Yeah, that's the thing about the Japanese in those relocation camps. They didn't sit around and mope as a whole. They got up and made something more positive, as positive as it could be.
And you remember actually seeing this around the neighborhood?
Oh yeah, posted on the telephone poles.
That just must have been such a horrible...
Like a slap in the face. As a teenager, you're so much more adaptable, but I'm sure the older people
Probably realized.
Oh yeah, they went through a lot. Well, we had our clubs, each area, the girls would form clubs. Many girls' clubs. Yeah. My sister was in the Royalettes.
Oh,
yeah.
Was there a rivalry?
No, they were older. There were more rivalries between Radels and Belle Charmiers. Oh. Then we had dances, not necessarily with the whole band, but when we held the dances in the barracks, we played phonograph records.
And which records do you remember being popular?
Glenn Miller, Tommy Dorsey, Woody Herman, Artie Shaw.
I've heard that the LA kids who were in the camps were better at swing dancing than
We certainly were. We had a style that was looser because the influence of the blacks and the Mexicans, they influenced our dancing too.
And the style too. A lot of the boys were Pachuco style.
Exactly, and zoot suits.
Yeah.
With a replete.
And
the girls, we had pompadours. And,
you still don't like the pompadour?
well, I think I look kind of ridiculous.
No, you look beautiful. No, I think it was George Yoshida. He thought the Northern California kids were square.
Yeah, we did. We thought they were kind of stiff.
These dances, there would be a phonograph record playing. It would be a packed rec hall.
If it was packed, there were a lot of crashers. No, the girls' clubs would invite certain boys' clubs. Oh. It wasn't so exclusive, but, to handle, to control. Okay. Yeah. And get to know the fellows better. Yeah. It wasn't just the pop bands. After I left, they had kabuki. I don't know where they got the hair pieces, but they put on Japanese shows. It's an irony because they said Japanese can't assimilate and this and that and whatnot. And we're in there because we're Japanese. But then the administration lets them do all these Japanese cultural things, encourages it. Yeah. And they had sumo, they had judo. My father taught shigin, which is classical Japanese singing. So it's war, and war times have so many ironical.
Do you remember the opening band, Alfred Tanaka and the Surf Riders?
Yeah. Oh, they were very popular in Wyoming, and they got a radio tract, and they played it every week on the radio for the Wyoming people. The Hawaii boys are darker, and when they went to the bars, the bartenders thought they were American Indians, so they told the Hawaii boys, we don't serve Indians, and that upset the Hawaii boys, and they said, we're not Indians, we're from Hawaii. So they got their drinks.
The reason I traveled all the way to Honolulu was not only to talk to my friend Joy after so many years of emails and phone calls, but also to play music with her. To hear from the singer herself the songs which she sang at Heart Mountain. So we put together a concert for the families of old military veterans and friends. Aaron and I sang the songs I had written about Heart Mountain. Stories that are rarely told, about the mothers, about the women, about the resistors, about the people who lost their lives in these camps. And we even played a song I had written for Joy, called The Best Goddamn Band in Wyoming.
The flyer red musicians needed, so young Yoni grabbed his silver mouthpiece, tracked down the kid who brought a trumpet to Pomona, let Yoni have it on a free 2-year leave. Joy Teraoka, Nate Takashida, went to the tryout, she was only 15, with some girlfriends to cheer her on. Their club was called the Raiders. Mom said if you keep up with school, Joy, you can sing. Georgigawa Ojinise, he toured up the coast and even played Japan. Before the war, they ripped up the Florida ballroom, and don't sleep on those Shotokians. Under starlight, they danced behind barbed wire. Under the mountain, it meant something to sing. Stuck between two countries in a fire, the best goddamn band in Wyoming.
Singer of that band, Joy Teraoka, to the stage to sing a couple songs that were actually sung back then. So please welcome Joy.
She told me afterwards that watching the images projected behind us brought back memories of friends. Memories she thought she had lost, but came flooding back in. And then, to close out the concert, she took the stage and sang some of the old songs which the Georgigawa Orchestra once played. At the end of the summer, Aaron and I returned to Heart Mountain, and a day after the annual pilgrimage, as the sun was setting, we brought some of Joy's songs back to where she and the Georgigawa Orchestra once made music, behind the barbed wire and under the mountain.
I'll be seeing you in all the old familiar places that this heart of mine embraces all day through. In that small cafe, the park across the way, the children's carousel, our mango tree, the wishing well. I'll be seeing you in every lovely summer's day, in everything that's light and gay. I'll always think of you that way. I'll find you in the morning sun, and when the night is blue, I'll be looking at the moon, but I'll be seeing you.
Some kid drowned in the river. Now they're digging up a swimming hole. Yesterday I played center field. I needed some half innings alone. Doubled off the Buddhist minister. Knock the tie and run home. Mini Doka, bottom 9. Two-0 count, a good lead off third. Toss me something fast and low. I dreamt I saw a model plane this morning, flying past the boundary road. Caught the eye of Abel Grable, sliding into second to beat the throw. Flurry started and I thought of the man who got lost from block 3 in the snow. Blanketed in white, freezing in the night. Cursing and scared, feeling foolish, dying alone. The first baseman got married. They rode an army truck out to Twin Falls. Spoke their vows in a hotel suite as a broken pump organ wheezed through the walls. Little sister butchering the wedding march. Some sweet comedy to it all. Mini Doka dressed in white. Mini Doka. And snowdrifts bounce in the moonlight as the evening took the afternoon. Deep in the count, staying alive, 1,000 spectators, nothing better to do. Under diamond cut stars, horizon to horizon, in a translucent milk glass moon. Mini Doka in the night. Under diamond cut stars, horizon to horizon, in a translucent milk glass moon. Mini Doka dressed in white. Mini Doka.
Gila River,
Poston,
Jerome, Rower,
Amatchi,
Manzanar, Topaz,
Tule Lake,
Hart Mountain,
Minidoka,
So the last thing I want to do for this little presentation is to think about sound. I consider myself a historian of music and sound. I think oftentimes our histories are quite deaf. We don't prioritize what people heard, let alone the music that they listened to or danced to. And so not only do I love to think about sound historically, I also love to go to museums and sites like Heart Mountain and listen to the spaces of the history that I study. And on top of that, I'll go around and I'll take this field recorder and like a microphone, and I'll just knock on, let's say, the barrack that's at Heart Mountain and capture some of those sounds of the wood, or feet scraping on gravel, or running your hand through the sagebrush in the area, or the natural ambient sound. I love sitting with the actual sounds of these places, and then as a musician, what I do is I turn these sounds into rhythm tracks. So I'll load them into this little keyboard, which takes these musical samples, and then I can play them out on the keyboard and I can make beats. I love to use like these effects pedals. I find them to not only be good for manipulating sound and taking the sound of a Heart Mountain barrack and make it into something more musical. Sonic effects world, you have like a guitar signal, just a clean signal, it goes through and it gets affected through all these different kinds of pedals and stuff. I'm really interested how those same sort of effects as metaphor can be used to think about a story. I also find that sonic effects are really interesting metaphors for the historian to think about the past. So in my research, I take a lot of stories from people who lived in the 1940s. How are those affected as they went from that experience of life in the 1940s to me, and then what do I write? It helps me maybe be a more honest historian to say, well, we had that clean signal, that moment of lived experience in 1942. But then when it gets all the way to me in 2020, what has it gone through? How many times has it been looped? Has it been filtered? Or has fuzz been applied to it? Has it been warped and chorused in any ways, meaning multiple signals kind of like leaving each other from that first clean signal? Have we lost any of the integrity of the signal, of the story? I think a lot about reverberation and echo. Like, all the historian does is try to make sense of the echoes. The echoes and the reverberations around these histories. So I find these really useful. I don't know if I'm explaining myself that well. But then on top of it, to then have these sounds and have these effects laid out in front of me and make songs with those effects, I don't know. I think it's cool. I can't quite articulate what it does, but it helps me out as both a musician and a historian, and I'll leave you with some music. Then we'll do like a Q&A.
You'll never know. never know. You'll 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 never know. Never know. You'll never get it.
There are no bridges to the past. Don't fool yourself as you look back. The time is up, those years are gone. You have for now, but not for long. Pass it on and pass it by. Kiss me goodnight.
You'll never know. You'll never know.
We did it. We figured it out.
Thank you for everyone's patience with the technology in the beginning, but I think it worked. And I don't know about you all, but my heart feels really full right now. And I love joy. Like, that woman is just amazing, Julian. I want to make sure that our audience has the chance to ask some questions. So just a friendly reminder, folks, if you would like to ask Julian any questions, or if you have a comment to share, you can type that in the Q&A section. We'll also be monitoring the chat, so if that's more comfortable, either is totally fine. It was so lovely to see this kind of myriad of pieces of Julian. And I had a question just about, you talked about yourself as a historian and a musician, and you've gone through the American Studies program. Like, how do you define yourself? And tell us a little bit more about how your journey to like all of these intersectional things came to be.
Yeah. So, I mean, this kind of very multimedia, multimodal, intersectional project really has its roots from my time in Wyoming. I grew up in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm pretty obviously Asian American. My mom's from Vietnam. She left during the war. And yeah, I was raised in Nashville, and I really wasn't around any other Asian American people aside from my little brother. And it really wasn't until I moved to Wyoming that I kind of joked that I became Asian American. And that's because I sort of, I came to grad school after being a musician for about a decade, just touring around and being in bands and stuff like that. And I kind of limped into Laramie, really burnt out, and I loved it. My friends and I would just go rock climbing like at 6 a.m, then be back for like our American folk life class, like by noon, and my hands would be bloody and stuff like that from climbing out at the VU. And then I started traveling around the state for different reasons, for some school related and others just to go climbing. And when I would leave, people like Eric Sandine, who I know was on a previous program, he was like, oh yeah, check out these places. And Andrea, the folklorist, my friend, would tell me some other places to go check out, like the ice cream place in Farson, I remember. But maybe a little bit more heavy was places like Heart Mountain, you know, where all these Japanese Americans were incarcerated, or Rock Springs, where in 1885, 28 Chinese miners were massacred by a white mob and the entire Chinatown was burnt to the ground, sending people running as far as Evanston. So I kind of made pilgrimages just by myself or with a climbing buddy to these places. And eventually they became sites that I'd return to and I'd write songs about and think about. And then I went off to do my PhD at Brown in Providence, Rhode Island. And I had a really cool advisor who was like, well, you started writing these songs. Why don't you just do this for your dissertation? And so that's kind of where we are. I love to teach. I mean, teaching for the honors program in Wyoming is why I went off to do my PhD. I just have had such great experiences in Laramie teaching. And obviously I'm a musician first and foremost. And then this has been a really nice way to explore not only history, the history that's personally relevant to me, but kind of look into my own family story more and have more just, you know, empathy for everyone's history, regardless of who you are. And just now I try to go around and I'll show that movie to some high school kids wherever, or at a film festival, and say, you know, the point of this project isn't for you to really learn about Japanese Americans necessarily, or Asian Americans or immigrants. It's to ask your grandmother about what she went through, because it's a very interesting story. And unfortunately, mine both passed away before I had these questions to ask. So it's like any kid who's got a grandma or an auntie or whoever, any of your elders, you know, go see what they're up to. So I'd say that's kind of how I define myself, just as a teacher who wants people to do a similar process. You don't have to write silly folk songs about it, but you also don't have to write history papers about it. You can do lots of different things, but the important thing is capturing that story for other people to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love how layered and complex and just the fact that they are multimodal, strike in lots of different ways too. So a question from Sheila in the audience. Great program, Julian. Come back to Wyoming anytime. Farson still has ice cream and you can get a really big scoop. I'll add that part. And Wyoming has new snow today. She wants to know what courses you're teaching now, and do you have a Zoom concert scheduled anytime soon? Also, I will add, second, actually, thank you for sharing Joy with us. I've also fallen in love with her, Sheila. See you at the next Heart Mountain pilgrimage. So
yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, my heart is always in Wyoming first and foremost. I missed it desperately when I moved back to the East Coast for my second round of grad school. And we're out in Portland right now, so it's nice to be out west again, different kind of west. But what was the question? What class? I'm not teaching at all right now, so I'm all but dissertated, whatever that is. My last year of my PhD. So I'm just trying to finish up this project, which is a mix of songs and films, and then the writing part, which I have to focus on. So that's my goal. No teaching right now. A lot of informal stuff. So just trying to use some of these multimedia tools to pop into things like this, or some of my friends who are high school teachers, working with high school teachers out here in Oregon, trying to speak to, like that For Joy movie, some of these hidden histories that are local to different people. So I just did a short film about Japanese Americans in Oregon and wrote a bunch of songs about that history. That been working with a museum here to try to get into classrooms. So, you know, kind of taking advantage of the situation, see how it can be helpful to the real teachers, like the people in, like, virtually teaching high school right now, which is just insane. And if any of my multimedia stuff can be helpful, or if I can zoom into those folks, trying to do that. I love to teach. I don't know if university teaching is right for me. Like, I loved Wyoming. That was a great place to be, but academia outside of Wyoming has been a lot different than I'm comfortable with. So people always need teachers. So community college gig or high school or something like that in the future, or just trying to do this stuff. I like to think I teach through my concerts. And there's lots of different ways, and we sure need education a lot right now. To your other question, I don't have a Zoom concert schedule. The last thing I'm doing, because I really do need to focus on finishing my dissertation and some other stuff, is a concert for my friend Diego, who teaches at Davidson in North Carolina. So that'll go up on YouTube. There's a lot of stuff on YouTube right now. If you go to my website, nonoboyproject.com, you can see that big Oregon movie I just did. And yeah, I hope to be back at the Heart Mountain Pilgrimage again someday, because that's been really meaningful to play music there and to, you know, share someone like Joy's story who can't travel from Hawaii anymore, and just be around all those folks.
Awesome. I was reminded, so at the art museum, we've showed it artist Hung Lu. Are you familiar with Hung Lu's work at all?
No.
So she's a Chinese artist that's been in the States for a long time, and she uses archives. So I made this connection with your work and Hung Lu's work. She actually did research about Rock Springs and the massacre that happened there and painted this beautiful portrait. And I was just wondering for you, like, you talked a little bit about the value of museums and archives, but can you expand upon that at all, Julian?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm not at the, I don't consider myself like a museum capital A artist. Both my brother and my mom are fine artists and make more money than I do. But I'm more of a folky kind of guy, you know. But I have been working a lot more with museums recently and doing some concerts, and then also had work featured in an exhibit right before the shutdown in Philadelphia. Kind of taking some of the, like what I do with archives, which a much smarter scholar than myself said, I curate the I choreograph the archive. That's what they said I do. And that's a nice way to put it. It makes me sound important. And so I really both love the museum space as a place to do work that I can stretch a little bit more. So that's the reason I did this sort of sound piece at the end, because that is sort of the underlying rhythms and sounds for a lot of my music on record, but you don't really know it if you don't see the person pulling it apart and like sort of explaining that historical metaphor through guitar pedals thing. So I really like, you know, spaces where people are just focused on art because I can stretch a little bit more as an artist. So in an exhibit, I can just focus on the projections and the sound and do some neat things. Whereas most of my concerts, I'm trying to, you know, basically take my research from my hoity-toity lefty PhD program and bring it to the middle of the country, because that's where I'm from. I'm from Tennessee. I lived in Wyoming. I want to have these conversations about immigration and race, but not in a way where, you know, red flags go off. I kind of want to use folk music as a Trojan horse to go to a bar in Wyoming and just play a concert and have a conversation with some folks after. I really like the museum space because that's where I can get together with people who are there to really think about art. And then we can really talk about what's going on with the archive, what's going on with these sounds, and how does that make us think about history? So, you know, that's a place where I love to express myself. And it's also the place where a lot of this starts. Like, so much of the photography and film I use is from different museums and their archives. And I go through and I think about how it would work projected behind me while I'm playing a folk song, how that might add another layer to the, you know, lyrics, which add another layer to the music, which add another layer to the story that we're trying to tell in the first place. So yeah, I mean, museums are so awesome and important, and I love both the resource that they are for me as a scholar, but then what they also let me execute sometimes in a more like, you know, artsy way than just the guy with the acoustic guitar. So on multiple levels.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I can't help but go back to the Minidoka piece at the beginning, where the images are moving back and forth really fast as the taiko speeds up, and your body, like, I don't know about other people, but physiologically my heart started racing and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm in the space, right? So it's this full body experience that you don't get in an academic scholarship paper, and you don't quite get in a, you know, like bar folk setting. So it's like this full immersive experience that
there's so many different ways to tell these stories, you know, and we need like the programming that you've already put on, like Sharon's movie and what the scholars are talking about the legal aspects of this. If you take it all together, it's really important to get a full picture. But, you know, there's so many people who have written about this topic. It's kind of takes up too much space in Asian American literature, and a lot of stories like Southeast Asian folks and South Asian folks kind of get put to the wayside in our discipline because of East Asian stories. So I didn't want to do another academic work about the Japanese American incarceration. I wanted to do something, one, that was really personal to me. So a lot of these stories are just people who are like family to me, these elders in this community. And then two, I wanted to fill in those emotional gaps, like you were saying, or even those like physiological gaps. So if I can work with a taiko drumming ensemble and use the force of their dynamic performance, and then pair that with, that choreography of the archive, it's really cool. And then you can sing your folk song, and then you can also contextualize this for people or point them to a book they should read or another film they should watch. So I think it's just all about where can the gaps be filled in. And lucky for me, like I said, first and foremost, I'm an artist, and then I kind of fell backwards into academia through the University of Wyoming.
I love it. So a question for you: where does the name No No Boy come from?
Yeah, so it's a trick to get people to read a really great book called No No Boy. Historically, in the camps, when the US government kind of figured out that they really messed up imprisoning all of these 120,000 people, they said, oh, well, we got to figure out which ones are loyal or disloyal, as if you could be completely like American, 100%, whatever that means. But they wanted to try to weed the people out who were, quote, disloyal. And so a lot of people, for a lot of different reasons, they were given this huge questionnaire. And the last two questions were, will you forswear allegiance to Japan, and will you serve in the US military? And so for a lot of people, like my friend Hideo, for instance, who lives in Hawaii, he told me when I interviewed him, I was actually born in Hawaii, but raised in Japan. So he was what they call kibe. And if you were raised and educated in Japan, you were taught the emperor was like God. So then the American government, who's already imprisoned you, is going to ask you to forswear allegiance to God. That's a really hard thing to do for a kid who's like 18 years old or whatever. And so a lot of people said no and no to that questionnaire, those last two questions. And those are the no-no boys. Some of them actually resisted the draft and got put into federal prison for years beyond the incarceration. And the main character of that book, No No Boy, is one such person. And that book, if anyone's looking for a book, maybe it's not the best time to read really heavy literature right now in American history, but it was one of the first novels where I saw myself. It was written in 1957 by a guy named John Okada. And it just captured this torn intuitiveness. This guy who didn't fit into his Japanese American culture in Seattle once he returned from prison. This guy who didn't really fit in with his family, whose mom believed that Japan had actually won the war. And it's just this kind of broken in halfness that I really identified with as an Asian kid growing up in the South in the 90s. I saw myself in Ichiro, the main character. So basically, if someone comes to a concert or hears one of my records or something, and they Google No No Boy, the book will pop up. And so hopefully it's a trick to get people to read.
I love it. So another question, I'm just thinking about the value of partnership for you. You've partnered with the Taiko or Portland Taiko and other folks. Can you talk about the value of partnership and maybe where some of those have stemmed from?
Yeah, I mean, collaboration is a huge part of this, because for every song you see, there's at least one or two other friends who happen to be scholars who have influenced a lot of my thinking as a songwriter. So a lot of people from Brown in sort of my cohort of grad students who I've gone down to the border with a lot, thinking about how this history gets kind of passed on to new groups of immigrants, this kind of anti-immigration stuff that we're going through right now. People that have produced the records. My girlfriend Amelia has been singing with me since 2017, I guess. She's the oldest collaborator, and she filmed everything for this and helps me edit everything and sang harmony on that. A couple other people, Aaron from the film, sang harmony on the first song. And then my friend Stephanie, my sister, Stephanie Flores, who was an undergrad at Wyoming when I was a grad student there. And we used to just like play everywhere around Laramie, downtown in the plaza, played at the Buckhorn, on campus, just on porches. So we just play like acoustic guitar and cello. and so I have all these wonderful musician friends and scholar friends and artist friends and educators, most importantly. And it's, for me, it's just like, what can I do? I know I do something a little bit different than a lot of my colleagues. How can I work with you to I don't know, make something special and gets at the same topic that a lot of us study in different ways. And I hope that answers your question. It's just important to collaborate, and yeah.
Collaboration's in my heart too. So any other questions from the audience? I know I probably have more, but I want to make sure that we get folks out there with questions too.
Don't be shy.
Oh, here's a good one. Julian, do you want me to read all of that or just hit to the question part?
No, it's okay. It's just a question. No flattery from me, please.
I'm going to do it. So thank you so much for sharing your talent and your storytelling style.
You're welcome.
I wasn't going
You're
to.
welcome.
I wonder about the instrument in the film. It sounded like a Native American drum and flute. And then there were children and women that were shown with a small flute. Was that the sound of the flute heard in the film? And what kind of drum did we hear? Also, Saporiti is an Italian last name. Do you have any materials that focus on the Italian heritage?
No, but if you look at classic cinema, you'll find a lot of Italian American stories out there already. So I'm once again trying to fill in a gap. But I do love my my Italian side, coming from Milano, Italy, in the turn of the century. Yeah, great observations. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm actually a trained ethnomusicologist, so I shouldn't say this, but drums are drums, flutes are flutes. Every culture has them. And those specifically are not Native American. Although a lot of what I've written about recently has been kind of the overlapping histories of incarceration and reservations and things like that. So I appreciate that insight. But those are from the taiko ensemble. Taiko just means drum in Japanese, and taiko, like the scholar Deborah Wong would say, is like really one of the only and first real Asian American art forms. It kind of starts in the mid-century, and they play these incredible range of like dozens of big giant drums and little drums and make these beautiful rhythmic ensembles. And then you have like the fue or the fu, I don't know how it's pronounced, but that's like this flute that's played. Yeah, that all just comes from Portland Taiko, my friends at Portland Taiko.
And you recently did a performance with Portland Taiko. Is that accurate?
Well, we were supposed to. I'm supposed to be on tour right now. And like the pandemic, don't be a touring musician during a pandemic. You're not going to get a lot of gigs. But yeah, one of the big shows was scheduled for Portland in September with the Taiko Ensemble. We're going to perform live, and it's so cool to perform live with a Taiko group because it's like 18 people just banging the hell out of drums, and it's awesome. But that show got canceled. So what we did was that film I made instead, which sort of combines Taiko going around Oregon in rural locations and playing outdoors. And then I wrote songs that they commissioned me to write about like the first Japanese American immigrant, this woman named Mio, who came in the late 1800s to Oregon, and they named a town called Orient after her. So the movie's called Orient, Oregon. And yeah, so no concerts. I don't know when I'll ever do a concert again, to be honest with you, but it's been a good excuse to make little movies and things like this that people can watch again.
I love it. Can you talk a little bit about insider-outsider dynamics when researching and representing the stories of others? That's a question from Sarita. She's actually our Artmobile educator.
Okay, yeah. So I think I know what you're talking about. It's like an anthropologically kind of based question. Yeah, I don't know what I consider myself even within the Asian American community, to be honest with you, because I grew up in a very unique space. I don't meet a lot of other Asian Americans who grew up in Nashville, Tennessee. I do find a kinship with especially Vietnamese people, sons and daughters of refugees who grew up in the South like myself, of which there's a lot. There's kind of a unique bond there. But I tell you, the first time I went to California and I saw all these Asian people, all these Asian Americans, I was just like, thought I was in another world. People, I was like, how do you guys you grew up thinking you were normal looking? And like, it's like sad, but true. And so the Japanese American community, if that's the site of research for this specific question, we'll say it is. I don't feel like an insider or an outsider. I think the musician thing is helpful because I always have something to offer. That's probably one of the problems in anthropology historically, or ethnomusicology, is that we take a lot from different people you study. But by and large, when I go to a place like the Heart Mountain Pilgrimage, or I go out to J-Town in San Francisco, I'm usually putting on a concert. So I'm at the center of this thing. And then my site of ethnography, my site of research, is people kind of talking to me after the concert. So I always think it's important to sort of accompany, literally in this case with music, the community that you're working with. And so, yeah, I mean, musicians have always kind of had that insider outsider perspective. You know, that's been from like the jongleur, the minstrel in the way old European times. Still today, we can kind of get in and out of places. And I like to think that, you know, I always ask people, whether it's Vietnamese refugees or Japanese former incarcerees, you know, what can I tell people? And then take that to heart. And that's what that movie For Joy is about. It's like what Joy wanted me to share with people.
Yeah, I think sometimes about music especially gives access to things. My friend is the ED at the Wyoming Arts Council, Mike Lang, and we used to talk about music being something that you're almost a chameleon, right?
Yeah.
You can go anywhere. Yeah, and Sarita said reciprocity is so important. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's very important. And I think that's the way ethnographers are moving. But yeah, I don't feel comfortable unless just going, I did oral histories for a while, just going in, can I ask you about your deep personal trauma, stuff like that. The concert thing is interesting because, like I said, there's that first layer that's important for me as an educator, which is to play for like not home team audiences, not Asian Americans or people of color, but like white Republicans, because that's people who raised me. And I know like they shouldn't be demonized the way that a lot of my friends do. And so I like to do those concerts, but a lot of the research keeps coming with every show that I do. Someone will email me and say, this was my family's story, or they'll say it during the Q&A at a concert. And then that has become new songs or new lines of research.
I think that, I mean, that's exactly the complexity of this project and the exhibition that kind of stemmed this whole thing, is that it's not black and white. It's not homesteader versus incarcerated or you know, Japanese American. It's this complex story that gets woven and twisted. And I think we've had panelists come on in the past that said, oh, my grandfather was a homesteader, or my grandfather was this. And I think those stories are healing in so many ways too. And gosh, I personally think the world needs more of that too. So thank you, Julian, for putting this out into the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
We probably have time for one last question. If anyone has a final question, I'll give you all a pause to ponder.
Take a mindful breath.
That's right.
Isn't that better?
We all need some of those too, for sure. All right, my friends. Well, I just want to say thank you all so much for choosing to spend your evening here with us. I know there was lots of other options, but there was no muting here tonight, which is important to acknowledge. Thank you, Julian, so much for sharing all of your stories and your scholarship and your music with us this evening. So please share. We'll post a recording quite soon. If you're a student in the Honors College, I will post a little QR code at the end, and you can scan so you can get your credit for the SOAR program. But again, thank you all for coming, and just a friendly reminder that we have one more talk in our series, in our speaker series. So next week we'll have Bacon and Dakota and Aranulin from the Heart Mountain Foundation. So I hope you all can join us for our final talk in October, and we'll round out this series. So All right, everyone, thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening.